Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. In this program, we will interpret the book Black Swan for you. Whether you have read this book or not, I believe you are familiar with the name Black Swan. The so-called Black Swan refers to an uncertain event that cannot be predicted in advance but has a significant impact. This book explores a paradox about black swans, that is, why are we generally unaware of black swan events? Why haven't we learned from the black swan events? How do we deal with black swan events? After watching this video, you will have some basic understanding. The author of this book, Taleb, believes that this is because there are major flaws in the way humans perceive the world. For thousands of years, Europeans have always believed that swans have only one color, which is white, until Europeans landed in Australia for the first time and found that there were groups of black swans there. The observation results of this time overturned the conclusions drawn from the observations of thousands of years. For such cognitive subversion, the British philosopher Russell used such a more vivid example to illustrate. There is a clever turkey who has lived comfortably for 1,000 days since he was born. The owner feeds it on time and takes good care of it. After 1,000 days of careful observation and rigorous demonstration, the turkey came to an undeniable conclusion. Being well cared for and fed on time is an inalienable life enjoyed by a turkey. However, what it doesn't know is that tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and it will be a delicacy on the table, which is a shocking accident for it. The poor turkey never figured out why the first 1,000 days of experience couldn't predict what would happen on the 1,001st day. In fact, the way humans perceive the world has always been no different from that of turkeys. For example, after the 2008 financial crisis, Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, explained in the U.S. Congress that this crisis is fundamentally unpredictable because it has never happened before. You see, this is typical turkey thinking, automatically ignoring the possibility of unexpected events when making decisions. So, how can we get out of this kind of thinking and avoid the tragedy of turkey? This is the fundamental problem that the book Black Swan wants to solve. Let me introduce Nassim Taleb, the author of this book, the most legendary hedge fund manager on Wall Street. His career has experienced three major U.S. stock market crashes, namely the 1987 stock market crash, the 9.11 incident and the 2008 financial crisis. This kind of black swan event means a big loss for others, but it is a big opportunity for Taleb. He made a lot of money in all three stock market crashes. Taleb's great success in financial practice has made his black swan theory widely spread, and this book has become a must-read classic for dealing with uncertainty. Next, we will explain the black swan theory in detail from three aspects. First, from a psychological perspective, our psychological mechanism prevents us from recognizing black swan events. Second, from the perspective of cognitive methods, the wrong knowledge map allows us to underestimate the probability of black swans. Third, how should we deal with black swan events? First part. Let's talk about the first point first. From a psychological perspective, some hidden psychological mechanisms prevent us from recognizing the black swan event. These psychological mechanisms include narrative fallacy, confirmation fallacy, survivor bias, and more. First, the narrative fallacy. It means that in order to understand and remember a series of facts, the human brain will impose a causal relationship on these facts. It seems that these facts are well organized and interlocking, but in fact this causal relationship does not exist. Taleb pointed out that due to narrative fallacies, the history we read in textbooks is easier to grasp and understand than the real history. Why? After layers of after-the-fact explanations, the history in textbooks has become clear and clear, but the real historical process is not like this at all, but random, jumping, and precipitous, full of chaos and uncertainty. History is essentially the result driven by a series of major uncertain events. Such events are black swans. For example, what determined the direction of world history in the 20th century was a series of black swan events, such as the Great Depression, World War I, World War II, and so on. These events were completely unimaginable and unpredictable to everyone at the time, and, when they happened, people often made serious misjudgments about the situation. For example, when World War I broke out, Europeans estimated that the war would only last a few weeks. When World War II broke out, the French believed that Hitler was only a temporary enemy, and never thought that the war would last so many years. Strangely, though, we now look back at these historical events and feel that they were perfectly understandable, even inevitable. Obviously, after the incident, countless experts and scholars gave logical and convincing explanations for these historical events from various disciplines. We found that the cause and effect of the original incident were so obvious that all incidents can be attributed to a certain for some specific reasons. There were countless signs in advance that foreshadowed the occurrence of the event. The predecessors did not see these situations, but because of their ignorance, we are full of confidence, thinking that of course we will not repeat the mistakes of the predecessors. This is actually an important feature of the Black Swan event. It was unpredictable and unreasonable beforehand, but due to the narrative fallacy, it seems predictable and understandable afterwards. So we overestimate our abilities and greatly underestimate the possibility of another Black Swan event happening again. Narrative fallacy can also be understood as overinterpretation. The human brain is like a powerful automatic explanation machine, constantly looking for reasons for various phenomena. By looking for causal relationships, the brain is able to simplify the classification of information, so that it can store a huge amount of information. But the problem is that the more simplified and organized the information appears, the less we lose sight of the significant influence of uncertainty and the further our understanding drifts away from the truth. In other words, overinterpretation does not allow us to really understand the facts themselves, but only gives us an illusion of understanding the facts. This illusion of knowledge is reinforced by another psychological mechanism called the confirmation fallacy. It means that once we have a cognition in our minds, a hypothetical causal relationship, we will subconsciously look for examples that can prove ourselves correct and automatically ignore those negative examples. It is very easy to find only positive evidence. Basically, you can find a bunch of positive examples for any point of view. As more and more positive examples are collected, we will have more and more blind confidence in our cognition. Just like the turkey, it first committed the narrative fallacy, making a wrong interpretation of the owner's feeding purpose, then committed the confirmation fallacy, confirming its wrong judgment by continuously accumulating positive evidence and seeing no negative evidence exists possibility. On the 1000th day, it collected the most positive examples and had the most confidence in its own judgment, but it was also the time when it was most wrong. Talk about a psychology experiment. The researchers showed two groups of volunteers a very low pixel, very blurry picture at the same time, so blurry that it was impossible to see what was on the picture. Then, gradually increase the sharpness of the picture 5 times for the first group, and gradually increase the sharpness of the picture 10 times for the second group. When the pictures seen by the two groups of volunteers were equally clear, the experimenters asked them to say what was on the picture. Which group do you think will recognize the picture content faster? The answer is the first group. The second group had more information but poorer judgment. Because the more information, the more interference information is generated, and these interference information will make the brain form various false assumptions. It stands to reason that the brain should correct previous wrong assumptions based on subsequent new information, but in fact the brain's response is just the opposite. Keep anything that supports the preset point of view, ignore anything that does not match the preset point of view. That's why Taleb believes that information is poisonous. The more news details and gossip people know, the less reliable their judgment of facts is. In fact, the correct cognitive method is just the opposite, not to prove, but to false, which was first proposed by the philosopher Karl Popper. The so-called falsification means that once we have a hypothesis or judgment in our minds, we have to do everything possible to find negative evidence, use negative evidence to challenge and refute this hypothesis, and then put forward a new hypothesis, and then continue to falsify, so as to keep approaching the truth. It can be said that this is an anti-human process, which needs to constantly deny oneself and overthrow one's original cognition, and few people really do it. Moreover, in many cases, it is really difficult to find negative evidence, because those who unfortunately suffered negative evidence either died or disappeared in history, unable to make their own voices. Taleb called this silent evidence. If you ignore the silent evidence, you fall into survivorship bias. We also talk about turkey. Suppose there is a lucky turkey who is amnesty. It has lived for 10 years without incident and is the most respected chicken in the flock. With its own experience of 3,650 days, it has definitely announced to the flock that it has been well cared for. Punctual feeding is an inalienable lifestyle a turkey enjoys. Will the other turkeys believe it? Certainly, because all the turkeys who had the misfortune to suffer from the opposite have disappeared, unable to return to tell their stories. Think about it, history is often written by survivors, and when we interpret historical events, it is easy to fall into the misunderstanding of survivor bias. The above is the first point for everyone. From a psychological point of view, multiple factors such as narrative fallacy, confirmation fallacy, and survivor bias can seriously mislead our cognition, making us overestimate our own knowledge and underestimate the uncertainty of the world. We cannot see that the real historical process is driven by a series of major uncertain events, and the historical development is random, jumping, cliff-like, and unpredictable. The second part. Since the natural psychological mechanism of human beings will interfere with our cognition and make us unable to grasp the uncertain events of the black swan type, can we change our thinking and use more rigorous scientific methods to deal with it? Taleb's answer, no. Although the black swan is indeed an uncertain event, it does not apply to the existing theories of uncertainty. This is why. This is the second point to be discussed next. Uncertainty is also called randomness. Speaking of randomness, you may think of coin tossing, dice rolling, etc., but it should be noted that black swans and dice rolling are two different types of randomness. They have an important difference: the probability of rolling dice is known, and the probability of a black swan is unknown. The most common mistake we make is to think that all the risks we face come from rolling dice, not black swans. For example, if you were to open a casino, what do you think are the main risks you would face? You might think that the main risk is that there might be a super lucky gambler who walks away with a large one-off, or a skilled cheater. In fact, the bosses of the casino think so too, so the casino will hire mathematics experts to carefully study the theory of gambling, design the game, spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build the most cutting-edge monitoring system, supporting strong security measures to prevent gamblers from gambling, cheating, rioting, or theft of the vault. So, after doing all these things, has the casino already ruled out the most important risk, and it is impossible to have a big loss? Let's see what really happened. In a circus performance invited by the casino, a tiger unexpectedly bit its owner, and the casino lost $100 million. A casino was almost revoked its business license and paid an astronomical fine. Another time, the casino owner's daughter was kidnapped. In order to pay a huge ransom, the boss had to embezzle a large sum of money from the casino's treasury. Money. You see, the casino invests heavily in guarding against known risks, never realizing that its significant losses come from unknown risks. Taleb called this kind of error the game fallacy, that is, the wrong application scenarios of the two types of uncertainty, dice rolls and black swans. Imagine that there are two countries, one is called average country and the other is called extreme country. What dominates the average country is the uncertainty of rolling dice, while what dominates the extreme country is the black swan. For example, people's height and weight belong to the average country, and its uncertainty strictly obeys the normal distribution. The normal distribution is a symmetrical curve with a high middle and low sides, like a bell, so it is also called a bell curve. Its characteristic is that the farther it deviates from the average value, the less likely it will happen, and there will be no extreme cases that deviate very far from the average value. For example, if a person is 60 centimeters taller than the average height, the probability of this is 1 in 1 billion, which is 7 out of 7 billion people in the world. What if a person is 70 centimeters taller than average? The odds drop dramatically to 1 in 780 billion. The odds of being 80 centimeters higher are 1 in 1,600 trillion. Therefore, the probability of a person with a height of hundreds of meters or even 1,000 meters is so small that it can be directly equal to 0. This determines that no matter how tall a person is, he is insignificant compared to the total height of many people. You only need to randomly measure the height of 1,000 people on the Earth to get a rough idea of the average human height, and the larger the sample size, the more stable the observations, and the less important the changes in a single sample are to the whole. This is the case of the average country. The situation in extremist countries is completely different. Like human wealth, it belongs to the extreme country. Can you get a rough idea of the average wealth of the human race by measuring the wealth of 1,000 random people on Earth? Obviously not. The randomness of extreme countries does not obey the bell-shaped distribution, and the probability of data that deviates far from the mean is much greater than that of the bell-shaped curve, which means that a single sample will have a subversive impact on the overall result. It is very likely that the total wealth of the first 999 people is only a few $1,000,000, and the 1,000th person happens to be the richest man in the world. Now his wealth alone accounts for 99.99% of the total wealth of these 1,000 people. This is unimaginable in the average country. Then why can things that are completely impossible in an average country happen in an extreme country? Take a coin toss as an example. In an average country, the coin has no memory, and the result of the previous coin toss will not have any impact on the next one. The probability of heads up every time is 1/2, and the probability of heads up even 100 coin tosses is 1/2 to the 100th power. This number needs to add 31 zeros after the decimal point, which can be ignored. However, in extreme countries, the coin seems to magically have a memory. The more heads it accidentally tosses in the first few times, the more likely it will be tossed heads later, and the probability of 100 heads in a row is greatly increased. Improve. In other words, it is the Matthew effect, or the winner-take-all rule, that dominates extreme countries. Occupations such as actors, singers, athletes, writers, etc. belong to the extreme country, which is a typical winner-takes-all. There are no middle earners in this type of industry, just the 1% of superstars and 99% of dudes. Occupations such as doctors, accountants, engineers, university teachers, etc. belong to the average country, and individual income is distributed in a bell shape. Ordinary people are mostly, and it is unlikely that there will be a 16,000-kilometer high giant or a 10-centimeter high dwarf. As long as you work hard, if you keep your feet on the ground, you can get better and better income, but of course, there is almost no possibility of getting rich overnight in this kind of occupation. You can choose the opportunity of the average country or the extreme country according to your own risk preference, but you should pay attention to that. Don't take a map of the average country and go to the extreme country. Think about it. Which country does the financial market belong to? Absolutely, of course. How extreme is it? For example, half of the total gains in the US stock market over the past 50 years have been realized in just 10 days. However, what is shocking is that all financial investment theories and risk assessments so far are based on the bell curve that is only applicable to the average country. This is a typical adventure with the wrong map. According to these investment models, something like the 1987 US stock market crash would take billions of times the lifetime of the universe to happen. In fact, crashes of equal destructiveness occur every 10 or 20 years once. Even though modern investment theory is so clearly untrue, several economists have won Nobel Prizes for such financial theories, and Wall Street investment managers have won clients based on such theories. Therefore, Taleb said that this is a blatant intellectual fraud, which exposes ordinary investors to the risk of black swan events unconsciously. The above is the second point of the description. From the perspective of cognitive methods, the wrong knowledge map makes us underestimate the probability of black swans. The current tools for studying uncertainty, such as the bell curve, can only deal with the uncertainty of the average country, and are not suitable for the black swan of the extreme country. Modern financial investment theories are all based on the bell curve, which has greatly misled ordinary investors. The third part. Then, we naturally ask, what should we do in the face of the black swan in an extreme country? What can be done to avoid repeating the mistake of Turkey? This is the third point to be discussed next. Our first reaction may be, is there any way to predict and avoid black swan events? Unfortunately, no. According to the definition, a black swan is an unexpected event that cannot be predicted in advance. If it can be predicted, it is naturally not a black swan. To some extent, the black swan event is like death. We don't know when, where, and how it will happen. The only thing we can be sure of is that it will happen. One of Taleb's key pieces of advice for black swan events is not to predict them. Human beings have a common cognitive arrogance, that is, they are confident in their own predictive ability, and the more authoritative people in a certain field, the more confident they are in their predictive ability. In fact, there is evidence that experts are no better at forecasting than ordinary people, and that everyone is equally divided and the results are very bad. Due to the inherent cognitive limitations of human beings, the future is inherently unpredictable. In this regard, the British philosopher David Hume has a famous statement: the future cannot be deduced from the past, and the unknown cannot be deduced from the known. Not to mention predicting social processes, even predicting the trajectory of 3 simple celestial bodies, humans are still unable to do it. This is the famous 3-body problem. You cannot accurately deduce the trajectory of the 3 celestial bodies under the mutual gravitational force, and the small error at the beginning will be infinitely magnified as time goes by. Obviously, the interaction between countless things in the real world is extremely complicated, and human beings' predictions about the future are actually almost blind. We must accept the fact that the future cannot be predicted and we cannot avoid black swan events. But at the same time, we can think about it from another angle. How can we withstand the blow of the black swan event and even have the possibility of profiting from it? If you want to be highly resistant to strikes, a key word is maintain redundancy. From an economic point of view, redundancy is bad. It means idle resources and inefficiency. However, it is the wisdom of nature to maintain redundancy. For example, humans have 2 eyes, 2 lungs, and 2 kidneys. This repeated configuration is a reliable insurance against unexpected situations. From an investment point of view, maintaining redundancy means holding sufficient cash. Although cash cannot bring income, it will allow you to survive the crisis. When everyone else is dead, you are still alive, and you still have bullets, you are the winner. Just like Buffett, during the 2008 financial crisis, his company had a cash surplus of $60 billion lying on its books, accounting for half of the company's net assets. So how can you profit from black swan events as much as possible while maintaining redundancy? Taleb recommends a barbell investment strategy. That is, don't invest all your money in so-called medium-risk investments. In fact, this type of investment is not small in risk and cannot withstand the blow of a black swan. The money should be divided into 2 parts. Most of it, that is, 85% to 90%, will be invested in very safe areas, such as buying government bonds, and the remaining 10% to 15% will be invested in high-risk speculative businesses. Use as much financial leverage as possible, such as options. In this way, you can not only guarantee the safety of 85% of the reserve funds, but also have 15% of speculative funds to bet on the occurrence of black swan events. Compared with the general medium-risk investment strategies, the average risk of the barbell strategy is similar, but it can benefit from black swan events. To effectively use this 15% of funds, participate in as many small speculations as possible, and there will be more opportunities to benefit from black swan events. In fact, Taleb himself has been using this investment strategy. He believed that the stock market would definitely crash because of a black swan event, but he didn't know the exact time, so he insisted on buying put warrants with very low prices for decades, which is an operation of bearishing the market. During the long period of stable market, this operation will make him lose a little money continuously, which he calls bleeding strategy. Once the black swan event occurs and the stock market crashes, he can obtain extremely high returns. Enough to make up for small losses in previous years, decades, or even centuries. As for ordinary investors, they often make a little money in normal times, and then lose everything in a crash. According to Taleb's calculations, he only needs to have one black swan event in 100 years to recover his capital. In fact, in his 20-year trading career, the stock market has crashed 4 times, and this frequency is no one thought of it. The world is far less stable than people imagined, and Taleb earns far more than he imagined, and achieved financial freedom early. Taleb pointed out that with the deepening of globalization, global financial institutions are constantly merging and becoming one, and the resulting chain reaction will greatly increase the vulnerability of the financial system. This means that once a black swan event occurs, the consequences will be more serious than before. Of course, it also means greater opportunities for those who have mastered the barbell strategy. Black Swan was first published in 2007. It can be said that as soon as Taleb's voice fell, the subprime mortgage crisis occurred and financial institutions suffered heavy losses. And Taleb's Black Swan Fund, with an annualized rate of return exceeding 100% in 2008, became the biggest winner in the crisis. The above is the third key point for everyone. How should we deal with the Black Swan incident? First of all, we must admit that we cannot predict the Black Swan event, and we can only find ways to enhance our own ability to resist strikes and at the same time strive to benefit from it. To this end, it is necessary to ensure sufficient cash redundancy, adopt a barbell investment strategy, and use a small amount of funds to gamble on the occurrence of Black Swan events while ensuring the safety of most of the funds. Having explained this, let's briefly summarize the essence of this book. First, from a psychological point of view, multiple factors such as narrative fallacy, confirmation fallacy, and survivor bias can seriously mislead our cognition, making us overestimate our own knowledge and underestimate the uncertainty of the world, so that we cannot see the real world. The historical process is driven by a series of major uncertain events, and the historical development is random, jumping, cliff-like, and unpredictable. Second, from the perspective of cognitive methods, the wrong knowledge map allows us to underestimate the probability of black swans. The current tools for studying uncertainty, such as the bell curve, can only deal with the uncertainty of the average country, and are not suitable for the black swan of the extreme country. Modern financial investment theories are all based on the bell curve, which has greatly misled ordinary investors. Third, how should we deal with black swan events? First of all, we must admit that we cannot predict the black swan event, and we can only find ways to enhance our own ability to resist strikes and at the same time strive to benefit from it. To this end, it is necessary to ensure sufficient cash redundancy, adopt a barbell investment strategy, and use a small amount of funds to gamble on the occurrence of black swan events while ensuring the safety of most funds. In fact, after Black Swan, Taleb wrote a book called Anti-Fragility, which more systematically explores how we can build our own anti-fragile system in order to deal with the black swan event. Growing and growing stronger in a world full of uncertainty. You can find and learn through the internet or bookstores. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.